Okay, tonight we have yet another mishnah that I don't know how to tackle. Okay, I guarantee you that we will have lots of ideas, but I don't know the best way to approach the mishnah, and so we're not going to do the whole thing actually. Okay, but we'll raise questions on the whole thing, and then I think we're going to have to spend a couple of sessions because this is essentially like 5 mishnayos crammed into one, maybe. Okay, so let's start here. This is Gimel Yud Zayin in the most conservative numbering. Rabbi Kiva Omer, Schok v'kalos rosh margilin la'erva, masoros siag la Torah, ma'asros siag la osher, nedarim siag la Prishus, and siag la chachma shtika. Anyone want to try translating that? Schok v'kalos rosh. Yeah, Tamar?
Joking and I don't know. There's like literally, I guess, lightheadedness, but I don't know exactly.
Yeah. Okay. So joking is usually a good translation of schok, but how do you translate margilin la'erva?
Like accustom a person to erva.
Yeah, a person to, and we'll just say here. I know I gave a whole show on Arios how it's not like all sexual prohibitions. But we'll just say like sexual transgression. Okay, because I think that's like the meaning here. Okay, so in the context of anything sexual, schok has a different meaning. For example, I think the case where you see this is schok or tzechok also, I think are both like this. Where is it? I think this is going to be a riot to me. We'll see. By Rivka and Yitzchak. Where are we here? Yeah, nope. Rivka, you're going to be cooler, Rivka. Nope. Yeah, here we go. Nope. That's not it. Hold on. Am I thinking of the wrong thing? Oh, here we go. Yeah, this one. This is when they are in. So V'yishav Yitzchak b'grar. Yitzchak settled in Grar. V'yishtalu anshe makom le'ishto v'yomer achosihi. The people of the city of the location asked about his wife. V'yomer, and he said achosihi. She is my sister. Oh, I'm gonna go ahead and use Nechama Neima's translation. Hold on just a second here. Yeah, here we go. Yeah, Vahiki Archulo Sham Hayamim V'yashkif Avimelech Melch Plishim Ba'at HaChalon. So Avimelech looked out of the window and he saw V'yar V'hine Yitzchak Mitzachik Es Rivka Ishto. So it doesn't mean that he saw Yitzchak joking around or laughing with his wife. So Nima Novetsky translates it as playfully interacting, and then she says literally laughing with a play on the word Yitzchak, which immediately precedes it. In context, the word has a sexual connotation, perhaps meaning caressing or even actual sexual play. Okay, or let's say if you look in the Rambam in the Lauren, while I'm looking for this, you can say your
also point. Like by Chet HaEgel, I think it uses that term.
Right, but correct. Yeah, that's good call. Right, so that implies like some sort of sexual promiscuity. Or here's another one in Isory Biya in the Isser of Lo Sikrubu Legalos Erva. Of not doing anything that leads to arayos. He says, yeah. Asur la'adam likrut biyadav uvraglav o lirmos be'enav la'achas min arayos. It's also for a person to, okay, I just laugh because I think chords literally means to wink with his hands, but I think it means to like, I don't exactly know what it means, and with his feet. Okay, we'll see what the translation says in a second. O lirmos be'enav, or to like, like make eyes. To one of the arayos. So that's from here to be mitzachik. So I think the term that I would use for schok in this context is to flirt. Okay, let me just see what this hand thing is. Make motions with his hands or feet, or wink with his eyes to one of the arayos, or share mirth with her, or to act frivolously with her. Yeah. Okay. Fine. So I would say flirtation and frivolity, and that's also good because you get the alliteration. Accustom a person to sexual transgression. Okay, masoret. Plug for the Rabbi man's thing. What does masoret mean? Oh no. Yeah,
Does
tomorrow.
it mean a chain?
Okay, so it does mean to pass something down. Yeah. So what does Masorah mean? And when we say Masorah, like you could
Like
call
tradition.
it tradition. Okay, right. So Masorah is just the feminine version of tradition. Okay, so tradition. Okay, now siag is clearly a big word here. Anyone know what siag is? Yeah,
Fence.
Ella? Yeah, fence.
Fence.
Okay, is a fence for Torah. Ma'asros, okay, tithes are a siag la'osher, are a fence for wealth. Okay, nedarim, vows, siag la'prishus, are a fence for, okay, now this is a term which we're going to leave in transliteration. If you did have to translate Prishus, literally, what does the translation of Prishus mean? Yeah, tomorrow.
Separatedness.
Yeah, separate. Oh, that's actually good. Separatedness. Okay. Separate. Is that not a word, or is it separateness? I think separatedness is actually better, even though it might not be a real word. Yeah. And then in terms of the standard translations of it, in like what you think this context is, anyone have any guesses? So I'll say two words that Alex.
It might be off base, but it makes me think of Nita and the separation there. But
Okay,
I might
yeah.
be wrong.
Okay, so the two translations that I've seen used that I don't like are abstinence, which in English has abstinence might be a good word for this, like an accurate word, but in English abstinence has a sexual connotation, and then asceticism. Okay, is another word which we'll talk about why I don't like that. Okay, siag l'chachma shtika, a fence for wisdom is silence. Okay, or you could say or shutting up. Okay, depends on whether silent, like being silenced, or the phenomenon. Okay, so that's our mishnah. As you can see, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different topics here. Okay, that's why I'm saying like this is not I mean, there is clearly like a theme here. All right, but we're going to take this in different parts. Okay, so then now in the Kaufman manuscript, I find it's interesting. Rabbi Kiva says, flirtation and frivolity accustom a person to sexual transgression. Ma'asros siag l'Torah. Okay, tithes are a fence for the Torah. Nedarim siag l'Prishus. Vows are a fence for Prishus. And then siag l'chachma shtika, a fence for wisdom is silence. Okay, so it merges the tradition being a fence for Torah and tithes are a fence for wealth, but it ends up saying tithes are a fence for Torah. Okay, don't know what to make of that, and I didn't see any Mefarshim who took that. So make of that what you may. Okay, questions? Yeah, Ayala?
Well, the first one is obviously in a different format than the
Okay,
others.
right.
Like the others are like about the negative kind of, and the first
Yeah.
one is the positive.
Okay,
So
good.
why?
How does the first clause fit in with the rest, given its different format? Okay, now I'm gonna really quickly just answer that question with an answer because in case we want to decide that it's not a big question. I also had that question though. I think it's a valid question, but I think there's like a simple stylistic reason. So I'm just going to show you Rabbeinu Yonah. Rabbeinu Yonah. Okay, Rabbeinu Yonah on here. Oh, I went way too far. Says, so flirtation and words of sicha betela and idle chatter with frivolity, a custom of person to so he adds a third thing in. Okay, aval kovid rosh v'yira hem siag la'arayos. Okay, but solemnity, or literally heaviness of the head. Heaviness of the head and yira where do we go? And yira are a fence for arayos. Shekolzos a mishnah b'siyagim medaberes. This entire mishnah is talking about fences. So why, according to, hold on just a second, Lauren, according to Rabbeinu Yonah, I think he is answering the question or addressing the question. Why does it? Because he basically like restates it in terms of the same format as the other ones, right? Kovid rosh v'yura him siagim la rayos. So what is like stylistically? Why do you think this one is different? I mean, maybe this, I don't think this is a profound answer. Okay, is that if you look at Torah, wealth, Prishus, and Chachma, those are all positive, desirable qualities. And here we're trying to keep you away from erva. So Rabbeinu Yonah like says this really is a siag, but we don't want to use the same lashon because we don't want to suggest that a siag is only used for something like if it said yira and kovid rosh is a siag for arayos, then it would make it sound like arayos is a positive thing because all these other things are positive. So it has to like alter it stylistically in order to like not give the wrong implication. I think that's just the simple answer. Yeah, Lauren.
This is just a question in the Mishnah.
Yeah.
I guess to define like each terms, I guess for all the
Okay.
5 things, like what does he mean by schok, kalas rosh?
Are these 5 things, right? So we've got erva, Torah, osher, Prishus, and Chachma. Okay, yes. Yeah, Vanessa?
I don't know if this is worth asking, but we haven't actually learned the first parak. Like what is a fence and why are fences important?
Okay, that is a very relevant question. What is a siag? Okay, and I might want to add to that later, but okay, what is a siag? And Vanessa's saying the first parak because the first parak says the very first mishnah, right? Asu siag la Torah, make a fence for Torah. So that's probably where Mefarshim talk about what a siag is. Yeah, Ayala.
Okay, so I think this is also tacked on to that question.
Yeah.
But what is this telling us to do, or like what do we get from this?
Okay. All right. Practically speaking, what are we supposed to do in to make each of these 5 siagim?
But do we even know that we're meant to make them? Like it doesn't even say make them.
Right.
It's just,
Yeah. I think the implication is to make them, but I hear the question. I think it's a fair question.
because some of them like you would make, but some of them like maser, like that's a mitzvah, right?
I see what you're saying. Yeah. Okay. So I'll just say with regards to these 5 siagim. Yeah. Alex.
Might be a dumb question, but what do vows mean in this context? Because
Okay.
I don't know.
Okay, no, that's a good question. So let's just ask that let's just ask the parallel question. What are the 5 siagim? Okay. Oops. What are they? Schok, the kalus rosh, masoret, maasros, nedarim, and shtika. Yeah, I'm just lumping it all into one because I don't want to make a separate list. Yeah, Vanessa.
I guess you just asked. No, you didn't. I'm confused by Prishus. I think I understand the others, like why we would want like to have fences around.
Yeah. Okay.
Wait, actually, no. Now I'm.
Okay, so let's ask that also. Okay.
Is the
I'm gonna actually tack that on.
is the structure flipped? I got lost for a second.
The structure is only flipped for the first. Well, okay. Well, the structure is flipped for the first one in one way, and it's flipped for the last one in that it says siag lachachma shtika instead of saying
Okay.
shtika siag lachachma. Yeah.
Wait, so we want to protect Prishus, so that's a good thing.
Yeah.
Okay, that I misread it the first time. That was I'm less confused now.
Yeah, it starts you off on the wrong foot. Okay. And I might as well tack that question on here also, which is why is the last one worded in a different way? Yeah, Fega?
Is there a common thread for all of them?
Okay, good. I was waiting for someone to say that. All right. Is there a common, actually, let me put it this way. I'm going to make this a new question. Is there a common thread for all of these? And also, is the nature of the siag the same for all of them? Yeah. Vanessa, is that a new hand or is that old hand? Okay. Okay. Okay, so this, yeah, Ayala.
Like the classic question of who's the audience,
Yes,
and is
okay.
it for a
Now,
chassid or us?
I think here there is a good reason to ask that question. If you had to elaborate on why that question is more pressing here, I guess, than just asking it stam, what would you say? Yeah, that's a question for anyone. Yeah, Ayala.
I mean, I feel like I could kind of see it going both ways. Either like a chassid would want to be extra careful about these things, so he'd like
Yeah.
want to make a fence, or you could say like, no, chassid, of course he's going to be careful. So like, why does he need a fence?
Okay. Yeah. So I actually saw it in a different way, which is that, okay, it's true that anyone is subject to arayos. Okay. But I'm thinking like the chassid is probably not going to be someone who is actively involved in, he's not going to be as much in the danger zone in this area as the regular person. Okay. Maybe. Siag Torah depends on what that even means. If we're talking about mitzvos, so then that could theoretically apply to anyone. If it's talking about learning Torah, so then maybe it might be more relevant to people on a higher level. Okay, wealth. Well, if it's protecting wealth, that sounds like something that everyone wants to do. If it's talking about increasing wealth, that also sounds like something everyone wants to do. Prishus is something that is a high level. Okay, and chachma everyone wants, but is this talking about like a high level of chachma? So like it's some of these. So I'm gonna ask the question like this: who is the intended audience, and is the intended audience the same for all 5 clauses? Okay, some of them seem more, some seem more directed at the chassid in training, and some seem to apply to everyone. Yeah, Vanessa?
I think this is more of a me thing than a question we need to write down. I'm confused why Prishus is a value. Maybe I'm just not getting the
Okay, so you
translation.
happen to be in luck because the one what we're going to do tonight, both because this was the thing I prepared the most, and I also just don't know how to make heads or tails of a lot of these other ones. Tonight we're going to focus just on nedarim siag Prishus. Okay. So we're going to get plenty of that. Now, here is the other challenge. This is one of the challenges I had in coming up in preparing for the shiur, is I really don't want to go into the halachos of nedarim, okay? Because it is one of the most difficult areas, and I'm also not knowledgeable in it. But what we'll do really quickly is just the Rambam's introduction to what a neder is, just so we get the concept. I didn't think about doing this until just now. Okay, so the Rambam actually has a whole book devoted to okay, so you've got the 14 books of the Mishnah Torah. Hafla is hard to translate. Hafla is like the book of verbal expressions, maybe, and you have Hilchos Shavuos and then nedarim. So let's look at nedarim. So he says haneder nechlak l'shtei machlakos. So there are 2 categories of neder. Hachilak harishon hu sheyesor adam al atzmo devarim hamutarim lo. The first category is that a person prohibits to himself things that are permissible to him. Kagon shiyomar, like he says, peros medina plonis asurin alai shloshim yom. He says, for example, fruit that comes from such and such a country, fruits from there are asur to me for 30 days, ola olam, or forever. O min ploni mi peros olam, or a certain species of fruit is asur for him forever. fruits from the world. O peros ela, or these fruits are asur to me. Asurin alai. B'chol lashon she'asar. In any language that he says he prohibits, harizen asar behen. He is prohibited. The alpha pish ein sham shavua klav lo haskar Hashem v'lo kinoi. Even though there is no oath and there is no mention of God's name and no mention of even a nickname of God. Okay, so that's why people. I'm not saying you have to do this. Ask your posek, but that's why people are always careful to say bli neder, because statements don't need a divine name to be a neder. Okay, valzeh nemar b'Torah lesor isar al nafsho. Regarding this, the Torah says to prohibit a prohibition upon one's soul. Shiur al atzmo dvarim mutarim, that you prohibit something upon yourself that was mutter. If a person says these things are prohibited to me, then they are prohibited. I call this category vows of prohibition. Okay, so that's one category. The second category is we're not going to dwell on this one. Is you make a neder to bring a korban that you're not liable, that you're not obligated in. You say that I'm going to take it upon me to bring a burnt offering, or I'm going to bring a peace offering, etc. Okay, so spoiler alert, we're only going to be talking about this first category of neder. Okay, so basically, neder is the mechanism that the Torah gives you to create your own prohibitions on things that are permitted to you. Okay, so that is nedarim. Okay, any questions on just the facts of nedarim? Yeah, Alex.
Do Nazirs fall into the category of nedarim, or is that separate?
Nazir?
Yeah.
Yes. So Nazir is a special case of nedarim, so much so that the Rambam has a whole separate section for Nazir, but it is a category of neder. The reason why it's a separate category is there are with all of these other things, there's a standard set of nedarim a standard set of halachos of nedarim that governs your nedarim. So if you make a neder on fruit or on driving cars or on watching TV, all the same halachos apply. But if you make a neder of a nazir, it's a completely different mitzvah institution, even though it resembles nedarim, even though it resembles prohibitions in another sense. There's like a whole set of like other things that you do, but it is a subcategory. Yeah, Vanessa?
Why would someone do this? To like lower urges?
That's what we're going to talk about.
Okay, fine.
We know one reason, which is Prishus. Okay, but the question is going to be, what is Prishus?
Okay, so it's not silly that I'm confused.
No,
Okay.
It's not. Yeah. Okay, good. Okay, so what would you say? Okay, again, if all we know about Prishus is it means separateness, abstinence, or asceticism, if you just had to figure out based on just knowing what a neder is, what would you guess Prishus is, and how would you say that neder is? What would you say it means to say that neder is a fence for Prishus? Yeah, Alex?
I'd imagine that Prishus should be like the category of like, you would think monks and people like that who completely separate from like
sounds
enjoyable
like
things.
Right. Sounds like a monk type category where you're withdrawing from things that are mutter, right? And
Right.
what would fence be?
Well, I would assume taking on a vow for one individual thing would be better than being a full like monk situation, because separating yourself from the world is like objectively a bad thing in Judaism.
Oh, okay, good.
So it's
good.
like, okay.
Yeah, it's like what? Oh, I thought you were saying.
No, I was saying because like the idea of like being a monk and separating yourself completely would be considered a bad thing. But if you're like someone inclined to wanting to take on extra things,
Yeah.
then it's a fence, so you don't go too far in the wrong direction.
Okay, so that's interesting. A fence so you don't go too far in the wrong direction. So that makes sense as the idea of a fence, right? To like fence you in, right? But I'm just missing one point. How is it preventing you from going too far in the wrong direction? Do you mean like because it is a tool available to you instead of just becoming a total monk?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because
So you do it like in a more restricted area. Okay, that's a good shot. I like that. Yeah, Vanessa?
Yeah, I think I'm pretty much saying the same thing. It sounds like it's a way to help you from like overindulging.
Yeah.
For lack of a better word, like gluttony
Yeah.
comes to mind, but that's not what Prishus means.
Okay. No. That I think that is going to be in line with the definition of Prishus that we'll read in a second. Okay. Anyone else have any of their own ideas here? Yeah, tomorrow or questions?
Just to clarify what Vanessa was saying, are we saying two separate ideas, like, or one idea? Because I had an idea that was kind of opposite from Alex's, and I wasn't sure if that's what Vanessa was saying.
The way I understand it is that Alex is saying that nedarim are a way to, I guess to, I don't know if this is the best word to use, to give in to the monk-like desire to engage in asceticism, but without going full monk. And then Vanessa was saying that they prevent you from overindulging. So I also don't know whether those are two separate ideas or not, but I think they're both valid. Maybe I missed.
Okay, wait. So yeah. So Vanessa is saying. I mean, Vanessa, you could jump in, I guess. You have something to say about it, but not overindulging in monkness, but overindulging in physical things.
In physical stuff. That's what I thought Vanessa was saying.
Yeah, it sounds like it's, I don't know Hilchot nedarim, but it sounds like physical stuff.
Yeah. Okay, good. Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, Lauren.
It's kind of along a similar idea, but I'm thinking of like Kedusha, the idea of Kedusha, and like Rebbe's interpretation of how like the mitzvos of arayos and then kashrus are meant to like separate you from your physical desires. So I'm wondering if here nedarim are like an elaboration of other maybe types of physical desires that people may have that they're like taking upon themselves to help like elevate themselves.
Okay, so I'm glad you brought that up. I actually wasn't thinking about that. Hold on just a second. Yeah, so a good question is, what is the difference between Kedusha and Prishus? Okay, so Kedusha, the way we understand it, the way I've explained it in many shiurim and articles, is like transcending your animalistic drives, and the prohibitions of machalos asuros, of prohibited foods, and bios asuros, and prohibited sexual relations are designed to facilitate that. Okay, I just want to check the famous Gemara. There's a famous Gemara that says, Mikan Amar Rabbi Pinchas ben Yair, Torah mevia lidei zechirus. Torah brings you to caution or being careful. Zechirus mevia lidei zrizus. Caution brings you to alacrity. Zrizus mevia lidei nikius. Alacrity brings you to cleanliness. Nikius mevia lidei prishus. Prishus mevia lidei tahara. Prishus brings you to purity. Tahara mevia lidei. Okay, there's a discrepancy here. Whether it's chasidus. No, I think that's actually not where it's supposed to be. Anava lidei anava mivia lidei to humility. Anava mivia lidei yiras chet. Humility brings you to fear of sin. Yiras chet mivia lidei kedusha. Okay, actually, so I'm not sure which is the proper girsa here. Kedusha mivia lidei ruach hakodesh. Ruach hakodesh mivia lidei tchias amesim. Okay, so that's the chain. That's all you got to do. All right, so I guess if Kedusha is in here, then it is treating Kedusha as a separate stage from Prishus, but they clearly are related. And if we can answer that, that'd be great. In fact, so much so that I'm going to list this as a question. So what is the difference between Prishus and Kedusha? And in fact, you know what, since we're taking this question up tonight, what is Prishus? Actually, let's do this. Let's do tonight's questions. Tonight's questions are, so we did what are nedarim. So what is Prishus? What is Prishus? And then what is the difference between Prishus and Kedusha? And then how are nedarim a siag the Prishus? And then another question is, practically speaking, what are the guidelines for implementing this? Yeah, Ayala?
Maybe a difference between Prishus and Kedusha could be that Prishus is just like separating, and like holding yourself back, whereas Kedusha is like transcendence of like
oh, that's
elevating
good.
yourself.
Okay, right. So in other words, Prishus, you still need to hold yourself back, but Kedusha, you're not even interested in that, and you're elevated above it. That's a good descriptive approach. Yeah.
I was saying something a little different. I think I was saying like, Prishus is just like not being engaged in it or whatever, but like versus Kedusha is being engaged in something else, which is
I
like
see
more
what you're
ideal.
saying. So Prishus doesn't have an engagement in a positive. It's just the surah, just the removal from the negative, and Kedusha does have a higher element. Okay, I like that also. Yeah, Vanessa?
Just talking on like Prishus is more about like restraint, whereas Kedusha just like is inherently separate.
Yeah, so that was what I thought Ayala was saying at first, and I was saying something different. So I think both those are viable possibilities. Okay. Yeah. Okay, good. Now here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna read Rabbeinu Yonah's definition of Prishus, and then we're gonna try to come up with an English term or definition for it. Okay. And let's go old school here. The way we used to do this in the beginning of the year, way back when. We're gonna write down the actually, what I'm gonna do, hold on. Oops. Hold on. Restart at 1. Oh man, got moved. Okay, I'm gonna write down answers. Okay. So Ayala's answer. Actually, I'm gonna do Vanessa's answer first, because that was what I thought first. Okay, which is self-restraint versus transcendence. I always forget how to spell transcendence. Okay, that's code word. Okay, and then Ayala's answer is removal from the I'll just say the negative. Okay, we haven't really said exactly what that includes, versus involvement in a higher thing. Okay, so now let's do Rabbeinu Yonah. Okay, we're not gonna do the whole Rabbeinu Yonah yet. We're just gonna read his definition of Prishus. And I actually had extra time today because I finished my Friday article for once. So I actually typed all this out in English. Okay, vows are offense for Prishus. Thank you for the celebration, Alex. Okay, Prishus is an elevated character trait which brings good virtues to those who acquire it. I'm not exactly sure what that means. As they said, cleanliness brings one to Prishus. I'm not sure if he means that it brings good virtues to those who acquire it, meaning, and he's referencing that Gemara we just did, where like if you get this Prishus thing, then that leads to like other good stuff, or if he means that you need good values in order to get Prishus. Okay, but I think I assume it's the latter. Okay, that if you get Prishus, then that's like a gateway virtue to other virtues. Okay, this refers to one who separates from the pleasures of this world, even from things that are permissible, such as eating, drinking, and sexual relations, and also refraining from all other desires, such as honor, power, wealth, and other things like that. One who does this distances himself from the roots of physicality and matters of the body, and draws close to the roots of the soul and its foundation, bringing him closer to the service of his creator. Blessed is he. Now he gives examples. Let me just close the gap. How so? In matters of food, he only eats a minimal amount in order to live and to be healthy, in order to learn lots of Torah and to do the work of Hashem in abundance. Or he drinks only to remove his thirst and doesn't become drunk or uncovered in his tent. That's a reference to Noah having the bad effects of drunkenness. And he doesn't have sexual relations for pleasure, but only to fulfill the mitzvah. This is called the path of Prishus, in which his mind doesn't care to derive enjoyment from the world. Okay, so any thoughts on this so far? Questions, thoughts, summaries? Yeah, Vanessa?
Is this really an ideal week?
Okay, good. Okay, I was hoping someone would ask that. Okay, so this sounds a little bit like what Alex was saying Judaism is not in favor of. Okay, and what we're going to do is Rabbeinu Yonah later on is going to explain why he's not saying that, but the better explanation for why Judaism doesn't advocate that is the Rambam. So we're going to skip briefly to the Rambam, who says in Hilchos Deos chapter 3. Okay, so Hilchos Deos chapter 1 is about the middle path. Hilchos Deos chapter 2 is about Deos character traits you should avoid and go to the opposite extreme, and also how to cure diseases of the soul. And then chapter 3 begins by saying, perhaps a person will say, since desire, honor, and other things like that are an evil path and remove a person from the world, I will separate from them in the utmost and distance myself to the other extreme, to the extent that he will not eat meat or drink wine or marry a woman or dwell in a beautiful home or wear a beautiful garment, but only sackcloth and coarse wool and similar things, like the Roman or Catholic priests. This is an evil path and it is prohibited to follow it. Okay, so that's bad. One who follows this path is called a sinner, for it is said regarding the Nazir. Okay, so this is Anyone who's gone to Shalhevet, this is my Shalhevet model lesson that I gave every time. So he says, so it says in the Nazir, when he brings korbanos at the end of his Nazirus, he will atone for having sinned against his soul. So the question is, how does the Nazir sin against his soul? I thought it's a holy thing. So he answers, the sages said, if the Nazir who only abstained from wine requires atonement, even more so one who abstains from everything. Okay, so the idea is, and we're going to talk about the Nazir a little bit more later on, but in point and fact, even though there is a good in what the Nazir is doing, there is also a bad, which is that he's abstaining from wine, and there's nothing inherently wrong with wine, and God created wine, brei pri agafen, yain yisamach levav enosh, wine makes you rejoice, and he's abstaining from it, so that's a sin. So the kal v'chomer is, if the Nazir who abstains from one thing voluntarily needs to bring a chatas, kal v'chomer, people who abstain from everything. Okay, and if you think the Rambam's done, he goes on. Therefore, the sages commanded that a person should only refrain from things that the Torah withheld from him, and he should not prohibit himself through vows and oaths, things which are permitted. Thus, said the sages, is it not enough what the Torah prohibited you, such that you prohibit additional things for yourself? Okay, so like you know, it's not, there's not enough Isurim, you got to like make other things asur. Indeed, included in this is one who afflicts himself continually through fasting. Now, this is not something that we see nowadays, at least not in our circles, but back then there would be people who would fast and fast and fast all the time as like an ascetic practice. This is not a good path, and the sages prohibited a person to torment himself through fasting. I guess afflict is better, to afflict himself through fasting. Regarding all of these things and that which is similar, Shlomo commanded, saying, do not be excessively righteous and don't be exceedingly wise. Why should you make yourself desolate? Okay, so that's expressing, I think, what Alex was referring to and what Vanessa is saying also. This does not seem like a Torah type thing, okay? So now the question is, well, what was Rabbeinu Yonah saying, right? How can we make sense of what Rabbeinu Yonah is saying? And we have to kind of like use our own mind to like, you know, to get what, okay, I mean, I'm assuming that Rabbeinu Yonah is in agreement with the Rambam. Okay, maybe that's not the case. Maybe Rabbeinu Yonah was an ascetic. Okay, by the way, I was just telling someone, there is a group. Okay, let's see how well you know your Jewish history. Okay, there was a group. I mean, there's probably many groups like this. Anyone know a group of, like, I don't even want to call it a generation, a cohort, a demographic of great chachamim who were known to be ascetics in the period of the Rishonim? I was just learning about them today. Hasidei Ashkenaz. Okay, so the Hasidei Ashkenaz are not Hasidim like the Hasidic movement. This is way before that. They were in the 12th and 13th centuries in the German Rhineland. They were involved in a branch of mysticism, but this is pre-Zohar, okay? And they had many ascetic practices, okay? And prominent members were, the most prominent member is Yehuda HaChassid, okay, who wrote the Sefer Hasidim. The Rokeach, who is Elazar of Worms. I don't know Shmuel the Pious, Shmuel HaChassid, but yeah. So this is a big group, and the reason why this is relevant is because a lot of Ashkenazic minhagim are traceable back to them. Okay, and these are, you know, ascetic pietistic practices. Okay, anyway, so that's just an FYI in terms of history. Okay, but so it could be that Rabbeinu Yonah is like of that mentality, but let's assume he's not. So assuming he's not, how would you explain these Rabbeinu Yonah's, or these words of Rabbeinu Yonah in a way that is not going to the extreme that the Rambam is condemning as evil? Like, what is the Rabbeinu Yonah, what is this Prishus that the Rabbeinu Yonah is describing? And is there a word we can use for Prishus that captures that? Yeah, Ayala?
Maybe you could say like self-control.
Okay, self-control is a good candidate. Okay, so let's just do here. Hold on. Okay. Rabbeinu Yonah's answer. Okay. And these are possibilities. Okay. Self-control. Yeah, Tamar.
I don't have a word, but I feel like he's kind of recommending almost like being neutral towards the physical stuff. Like you're kind of like indifferent. Like you're not trying to destroy it, but like, yeah.
Neutrality or indifference to the physical. I like that one also. Okay. Vanessa?
I don't know if I'm overinterpreting it, but it sounds like, and mindfulness is not the word, but it sounds like he's advocating for like being mindful and like eating when necessary. Like,
okay, a mindful
intuitiveness.
Relationship to the physical. Okay, I like that also. These are really good. None of these are things that, except self-control. These two are not a direction my mind went. Yeah, Alex, but these are good.
Feels like it's like the minimum involvement you need to like go on physically.
Based on necessity. Okay, good. Okay, so I'll tell you where what I did is I felt like I knew that there might be an English word for this. So I did cheat, and I'm going to tell you a thing that, like, I know everyone has their own relationship with AI now, but I found that lately asking it English questions has been good, whether it's grammar questions or like using it as like an advanced thesaurus that you can have a conversation with. Okay, so I had a conversation with it, and I'll read the conversation here. Okay, so this is ChatGPT. What is a word for the moral quality of breaking one's attachments to the physical world and its pleasures? So it says the word you may be looking for is asceticism. Asceticism is the practice of self-discipline and self-denial, often for religious or spiritual purposes, which involves giving up material comforts and pleasures in order to achieve a higher level of moral and spiritual purity. It can also refer to a lifestyle of simplicity and austerity characterized by a deliberate rejection of material possessions and worldly pleasures. So as I mentioned, I don't like the word asceticism because I think that is what the Rambam is condemning. So I said, asceticism implies a rejection of pleasures as evil. Is there a word which conveys the quality of not being attached to physical pleasures, which doesn't carry that connotation? So it says, yes, there is a word that conveys the quality of not being attached to physical pleasures without implying that they're evil. The word you're looking for is detachment. Detachment is the state of being objective and not influenced by personal feelings or emotions, which in this case means not being overly attached to material possessions or physical pleasures. It can also refer to the ability to let go of attachments in order to achieve a higher state of consciousness or spiritual enlightenment. Unlike asceticism, detachment does not necessarily involve a rejection of pleasure, but rather a lack of dependence on it for happiness or fulfillment. So I thought that was a really good description, but then I still wanted a word just to see if there is one. And reading this reminded me that I thought I encountered a word like this for something in Buddhism. Okay, so I asked, is there a specific term for this in Buddhism? So it says, in Buddhism, the quality of not being attached to physical pleasures is referred to as non-attachment or non-clinging. I don't know how to pronounce this. Anupanena in Pali, which is a language that a lot of Buddhist concepts are in. It is one of the key principles of Buddhist practice, as attachment and clinging are seen as the root cause of suffering, dukkha, and the obstacles to spiritual liberation, nirvana or enlightenment. Non-attachment in Buddhism is not the same as asceticism or the rejection of pleasures as evil. Rather, it is about finding a middle way between indulging in sensual pleasures and completely renouncing them. Non-attachment involves recognizing that pleasure and pain are impermanent and ultimately unsatisfying, and therefore not becoming too attached or dependent on them. It is about cultivating a sense of inner peace, contentment, and equanimity that is not dependent on external conditions. So I thought that was also a really good candidate for like a description. Yeah, Vanessa?
This is exactly what I was describing, because mindfulness is one of the tenets of DBT, and DBT is rooted in Zen Buddhism.
Okay, there you go.
Talks about non-attachment. That's exactly what I was going for.
Okay, good. So I read this and I was like, okay, this sounds good. But then I was like, okay, but ChatGPT, you obviously can't rely on it for accuracy, right? So it happens to be that I am Facebook friends with the world Jewish, Orthodox Jewish expert on like Hinduism and Buddhism and like Eastern things, Rabbi Dr. Alan Brill. So I texted him and said, I'm giving a shiur in Pirkei Avos in 40 minutes. So I sent him this whole response, and I said, I wanted to ask whether the information provided by this is accurate, whether there's a word or term you would choose, and if you have anything to add. So he said, and I asked him like what Prishus is. So I said, he says, literally the word Prishus means separation. So it can be translated as self-restraint, discipline, moderation, or self-control. The Buddhist term middle way works as it is the Aristotelian approach of the Rambam. If you want it more stoic or avos, see, he knows my my interests. Self-mastery, more avos in the self-mastery who is strong, one who subdues the master or masters the self. However, I would avoid Buddhist terms that imply impermanence. Judaism does not view impermanence in the Buddhist way. So I didn't ask him to elaborate because I had to prepare for shiur. So I don't really care about having a word. What I care about is the concept. And I think we're like honing in on what this concept is, and it'll probably become clear as we go. But I think that it is this, I don't know if it's a combination of these things, but it definitely involves discipline, okay, and self-restraint. It definitely does involve not being attached to worldly things. And the fact that Rabbeinu Yonah uses these words of like distancing yourself from the roots of physicality and drawing close to the roots of the soul and its foundation does seem to be like what Ayala is saying, of like some detachment from the physical and attachment or moving towards like the supernal. I don't know if that's the right word, supernal. That just came out. So yeah, Vanessa? No?
I was gonna make a statement, but I don't actually know Buddhism, but like the idea, like if we're applying this in a Jewish lens and like making it distinct from like the Buddhist term and like letting Prishus be its own word, we do want to be attached to the spiritual stuff, whereas like a Buddhist would want to be like totally like neutral on all fronts.
Okay. Yeah, I also don't know Buddhism enough to know about that, but yeah. But you're right. We do want to be attached in a good way. So I think let's just keep these concepts like on the front burners here, okay, as we go on in the Rabbeinu Yonah. All right. So now he's going to start getting into the practical, but first he gives us a benefit of Prishus in addition to this stuff. Okay. So he says there is a second benefit, and I'm okay. Hold on a second. How can I say this? There's no way for me to say it without saying it. I'm very curious as to what you think about this, because I thought something about this, and the fact that I'm telling you to tell me what you think means that I don't want to influence you, but I think I already have. Okay. There's a second benefit, that he guards his soul from sin. For when his inclination overpowers him and he desires to commit a transgression, he will say in his heart, I guard myself from these permissible enjoyments. How can I do this great evil and sin to my Father in heaven for all the days? And this matter will prevent him from stumbling. Okay. Yeah, you know what? Let's just pause here for a second. What do you think of that? He's saying this is going to help you guard from sin, because basically if you get tempted by the Yetzer Hara and you have Prishus, you're going to say, well, I have all this Prishus. There's no way I can actually sin. Yeah, Tamar?
I mean, maybe it depends a little bit on the context, but I feel like it would be easy to not have this happen. I don't know if that makes sense.
Okay, yeah. How so? Like, what would you say? Because that was my reaction as well. Like,
I guess, like, for example,
on paper.
Yeah, like for example, I guess if a person is, let's say, I'm a little bit maybe blurring this with nedarim, so maybe that's a problem. But like let's say a person says that they're gonna like not eat fruit or something, right? And so now they're tempted by something that's not kosher, that's actually usher from, halacha, right, from before. So like if they just kind of willy-nilly forbid stuff to themselves, then they're going to be under more pressure from their pleasures because they can't even satisfy them in a personal way.
Right. I think that's one route to failure, is that if you deny yourself too much in one area, so then it might express itself as a greater desire or temptation to violate Isser. Okay, that's one way this can fail. Yeah, Ayala?
I was thinking that like if you would say, if like the mechanisms behind this can be maybe like strengthening the super ego of like,
okay, good.
You're kind of strengthening the idea that like you are like, you'd feel really guilty if you do a really big sin because you already feel good about yourself.
Okay, so one way that this could work is either strengthening the super ego and ramping up the guilt, or if you want to put it in more positive James Clear Atomic Habits terms, that I don't have the I somehow either lent out my copy or I misplaced it because I don't have my version, so I can't read from it right now. But I think in one of the early chapters, he says something like that the key to behavior change is identity change. And if you make yourself have this identity of I am a parush, then it's easier for you to resist the temptation to give in to your yetzer in areas that are usher. Like I'm someone who does separate from these things. How can I act against my identity in that way? So I think that's another check in the column of Rabbeinu Yonah. Yeah, Vanessa?
I keep saying this. I don't know Hilchot Nedarim, but I do remember something about like you're not supposed to put on too high of a stringency. So I think if we're looking at this in the lens of someone who has applied a neder properly and didn't put on a stupid neder, like I'm thinking of like a vegetarian, like someone who like they don't eat non-kosher meat, but also like for ethical reasons and like whatever the Torah value on this aside, but like for their own ethical reasons, they're like, no, I'm not going to eat meat. They're not going to crave a cheeseburger. They're going to be like, how, if I'm not even going to eat a cow, how could I like douse it in its mother's milk?
Right.
You know what I mean?
So,
like,
so you're saying if you're building this on Torah values and the Isser is rooted in the Torah values, then you're not going to do a more severe version of violating those values if you're already giving up a less version. Okay, that's another good check in this column. I like this. Okay, yeah.
And also,
sorry. No, go ahead, Vanessa.
I was just going to say, like, and if you do a stupid neder, like, I'm not going to eat for 40 days, like, yeah, you're going to eat whatever is in front of you later. And like, that's why you're not supposed to like, which
okay, that's good. That's a good consistent explanation. Yeah, Alex?
I'm just curious, if you were to take on a neder and then you broke it, would it be considered equivalently bad to be breaking like something that is like in halacha?
Yes. That's the crazy thing about nedarim, which is why nedarim are discouraged, which is you are creating a new Isser deoraisa for yourself. You know, it's like you're creating a 614th mitzvah, you know? So it's like a very stringent thing. The only thing I would say is halachically it's as bad, you know, if obviously, you know, let's say worst being avodah zara, and if I say I'm not going to watch TV tomorrow and I watch TV, you know, like halachically you're violating Isser deoraisa, but like the consequences of avodah zara are way worse than watching TV. So like the fact that you know, I'm not saying that the actual act is bad, but legally the violation is the same category. I was thinking that the reason why this doesn't work is because people are really good at compartmentalizing. I don't know about you, but like I definitely am capable of being very strict in certain areas, and in other areas I'm like, you know, or like I just ignore it, or you know. So I think people are very good at compartmentalizing, and that's why this wouldn't work. I was talking to another chavrusa, and he gave two other reasons why this doesn't work. Is he said that it's very easy if you set the bar too high and then you violate you do a violation, that can lead to a downward spiral of like, oh, well, it doesn't matter anymore, and I'm just going to violate all this other stuff, you know. And then another thing he said is, and this I thought was really sharp, he said, people who take on extra stuff feel like they're entitled to certain violations in other areas. Like, oh, I'm just going to reward myself, you know, and like violate this other thing, you know. So I think that's another like pitfall. Yeah, Alex?
I guess I feel like you would have to have a high level of self-awareness to be able to understand what you're capable of taking on as a stringency versus not. And like most people don't have that.
100%. Yeah, correct. Yeah, you need a lot of self-awareness. You need a lot of self-knowledge. Like you can be very self-aware, but if you don't know your own psyche in terms of like how you will react with certain restrictions, it's gonna fail. Okay, so I'm happy that we came up with arguments that do vindicate Rabbeinu Yonah, but I think overall this is not let's put it this way, in this day and age, or with most people that are in our circles, I don't know if this is a reliable strategy. So that doesn't discount the you know, what he's about to say. Okay. Then he says, but one who draws closer to his physical nature and is pulled after its enjoyment, even if he doesn't do anything prohibited, will nonetheless distance himself from the root and soul of his soul and its foundation. He will also cause his soul to be drawn after the body and the physicality, and will cut it off from its root and foundation. As it is written in Hosea 4:11, licentiousness, wine, and new wine take the heart. In other words, licentiousness or wine and new wine take the heart, which is the mind. As it is stated, one who listens to rebuke acquires heart. Okay, so what is he saying here? It's a little, he keeps on using this phrase of like distancing yourself from the root and foundation of the soul. And then he just throws in this pasuk here. What do you think his point is here? Yeah, Ayala?
Sounds to me like kind of like what your energy will be directed towards. And if your energy is directed towards physicality, then it's gonna completely remove it from anything besides that.
So in other words, like this, I'm gonna approach that from a different angle, which is that I think his point here is that it's not like you're in a state of neutrality and then you engage in Prishus as like a level up. you are either being drawn to the physical, or you're being drawn, or you have to like pull away from the physical and cultivate like this attachment to matters of the soul. So that kind of addresses our question of who this mishnah is for. It's not, there are things in Pirkei Avos where you can say like, okay, I'm on the normal level, but when I choose to, I'm going to be a chassid and get to a higher level. This is something where like, I think people use the metaphor of the escalator, in certain ways where like, like we have a default draw downward to the matters of the body, and Prishus is not just a higher level. It's also an act of resistance away from that downward development, I think that's what he's emphasizing here. And he's emphasizing that it corrupts the mind. The more you are drawn to the physical, the more it actually like takes the heart, which means it corrupts the mind. Okay. So then he says, oops, I copied and pasted this twice and forgot to translate this. So we're going to translate it live. All right. Therefore, Nasnu Eitza, they gave advice, to one who cannot control his emotions, Vinimshach achar ha'anaos, and is drawn after his enjoyments, lindor neder liyamim, to make temporary vows, lemor, saying, Adzman ploni lo ochel v'lo eshtek im kashir shir kazeh, until this specific date, I will only eat and drink in this measure, or prohibit himself in something which is permitted. Okay, and habit will rule over him. And because he fulfills his vow, he will consequently train himself to subdue his inclination. And through this, he will attain the character trait of Prishus. Okay. And then he gives an example, as it was said to Ravi Pinchas, lo yachalta le lemechal chulecha batara kulashata. If you cannot, okay, I'm going to go to the background here. So if you are a Kohen, you cannot eat something in a state of Tuma, or if there's something Kodesh, you can't eat it in a state of Tuma. But there were people called Prushim, people who were like characterized by Prishus, who would, sorry. Let me back up for 1 second. Let me just read it from the Rambam. Okay, Rambam in Sefer Tara, in Tumas Ochlin, the laws of Tameh foods, at the very end. Again, this is the trick is that Rambams at the end of sections tend to have philosophy. It is mutter for a normal person to eat and drink foods and drinks that are tameh. Okay. Nevertheless, Hasidim Harishonim, the pious early sages, they would eat their non-sanctified food in a state of tara, and they would guard against forms of tuma for all their days. They're called prushim, which is where the name Pharisees comes from, which is what we were named. This is an extra level of kedusha that's commenting on our kedusha question, v'derech hasidus, and a manner of piety. Adam nivdol uporish mishar ha'am, that a person should be separate and removed from the rest of the people, v'lo yigavhen, and not touch them, v'lo yochol v'yishtei imahen, and not eat and drink with them. So it's interesting. He's saying it's a social thing to distance yourself from the average people. Shaprishus mevilide taras aguf mimasim arayim. Now here's the Rambam's take on that Gemara. Prishus leads you to purity of the body from bad actions. The taras aguf, and purity of the body, mevilide kedushas nefesh, brings you to sanctity of the soul. Min hadeos haras, from bad character traits. Kedushas nefesh goremes lidamas b'shchina, and kedusha of the soul causes you to cling to the shchina. Shnemar, as it says, "Peace kadishim nevisim kadoshim ki kadosh ani." You should sanctify yourselves and be kadosh because I, Hashem, am kadosh. And then that's the end of the section. Okay, so that's the thing, is that there's this extra level of eating everything in a state of tahara. So it was said to Rav Pinchas, if you cannot eat your regular food in a state of tahara, of purity, kulashata, at all times, echol shiva yomi, do so, so eat it this way for 7 days. Okay. Sheha'ochel chulin b'tara nikra parush. For someone who eats mundane food in a state of purity is called parush. Okay, then he quotes a halakha about that. So Rabbeinu Yonah is giving us an interesting thing here, right? So what's the recipe? How do you use this practically? So either you make a neder with an expiration date based on quantity, or I think he's, by the way, even though he doesn't say it here, I think proved himself for a limited time span in something which is permitted. Okay, so you either control the quantity or you control the quality. All right, and then how is he saying you get Prishus from that? That's the thing that's interesting. Yeah, Vanessa.
This practice will subdue the like over inclination, and like it'll bring you back to like normal or like a healthy level.
Okay,
and then and that's attaining the character trait of Prishus.
Okay, so I think that okay, it could be that that's what he's saying. I think that will fit in better with the Rambam, which I'm just debating whether to read right now. Let's actually, I want to read the Rambam just to, I think that'll help us understand the Rabbeinu Yonah. So now this is the Rambam in the end of the laws of nedarim. Okay, so this is where he explains his take on nedarim. He says, if a person makes nedarim in order to fine-tune his character traits and correct his behavior, this is a nedarim 13, 24, and 25. So if a person makes a nedarim in order to fine-tune his character and correct his behavior, this is beautiful and praiseworthy. How so? If a person was a glutton and took a neder forbidding himself to eat meat for a year or two, or if a person who was addicted to wine took a neder forbidding himself to drink wine for an extended period of time, or forbidding himself to ever become intoxicated, which I think the reason why he uses both examples is there are two types of problems you can have with wine. One is you get drunk. So there you could prohibit drunkenness. The other is you just, let's say, just drink too much wine. Like you drink wine at every meal, and maybe that's too much. That's one way to understand why he says these two things. Or another one is he's saying maybe for some people, they need to prohibit all wine, but other people, they could just prohibit drunkenness. And if they can drink one glass, then that's fine. Okay, likewise, if a person chased after bribes and was overexcited about wealth, took a neder forbidding himself to accept gifts or to benefit from people in a certain region. Similarly, now this is answering the question that Alex asked about a Nazir. Similarly, if a person who was haughty on account of his own beauty took a neder Nazir, okay, to grow out his hair, and it's funny he only puts it in that context because the Nazir also has a wine problem, right? Whatever. And the same for all similar cases. All of these are paths of avodah Hashem, of divine service. Regarding these nedarim and those like them, the sages said nedarim are a safeguard for restraint. Okay, that's our mishnah. Okay, so this is like, I think what Vanessa was saying is like you have a problem, and you use neder to avoid it till you get back on track. Okay, while we're here, let's just read this last two statements. Even though these vows constitute avodas Hashem, a person should not be excessive in taking prohibitory vows, and he should not get into the habit of making them. Okay, because then you get into a problem because they have to make a neder to break your addiction to nedarim, and that just messes you up in all sorts of ways. Instead, he should he should abstain from those things from which one should abstain without taking a vow. Okay, in other words, you should do it without a vow if you can. The sages said anyone who makes a vow is considered as though he built a bama, a private altar. And if he transgressed and made a neder, it is a mitzvah to ask a chacham to absolve it so that he will not be faced with a stumbling block. I wrote an article about this, which I don't remember what I said, so I can send the article afterwards. Okay, so Rambam's view is you're using nedarim in like a remedial way of going too far to one extreme. Okay, and it's like you're in one extreme, so you go to the other, and then you get back to the middle path. Is Rabbeinu Yonah saying that, or is he saying something else? I think it is possible he is saying that, but yeah, Ayala?
It seems to me like he was saying two things. I think first, and habit will rule over him. So like he's creating a habit of not doing this thing.
Yeah.
And then also I thought he was saying he will consequently train himself to subdue his inclinations. So he's also building self-control.
Okay. Yeah. So I think, you're right. I do think that's two things. I think I view them as one. That, so first and foremost, he is practicing habit cultivation, right? And that's different than exercising self-control in each and every instance of temptation, right? He's trying to make it into a habit. And then what he's doing is through making it a habit, he is training himself in the act of subduing his inclination, and then that's going to lead him to Prishus, which I think, by the way, you see from here, Prishus, according to the way Rabbeinu Yonah is using it, is not synonymous with self-control. Because if that were the case, then you wouldn't say controlling your Yetzer Hara brings you to Prishus. You would say it is Prishus. All right. So I think that's why we can eliminate self-control. Yeah, we can eliminate self-control. Yeah. Lauren, did you have a question or yeah, Lauren?
Yeah, it's just a comment. Like, I feel like he's saying that, like, engaging in this, in these nedarim will help you have, like he says, the character trait of Prishus, which means more like that detachment that we were talking about, this attitude of, like, being detached from physical things. Like, you do it, but not out of necessity, not because, like, you really desire it.
Right, exactly. Yeah, that's good. Okay. Although I do still think that, I forgot who said what now, but I do think that minimal involvement based on necessity does seem to be part of his definition of Prishus, because in the example he gave with the food, he does say he only eats a minimal amount, and then with the sex, he only he doesn't do it for pleasure, he just does it for the mitzvah. So it does seem to be like, in other words, like this. The question is, would the parush in Rabbeinu Yonah's world drink wine and eat good food, or would he not? And the difference is like this: is the first way is I can eat good food, but just not be overly attached to it, and I can eat stuff, I can relate to these enjoyments and pleasures in a healthy way. Okay. Or the other way is to say, no, I have trained myself to like be content with what is minimal and what is necessary, and I am avoiding these excesses. Is the avoiding of the excesses like a means or a stage of development to Prishus, or is it actually part of the character trait of Prishus? Like, there is another word that I don't know who uses it. There's another word that people call it histapkus, which means being content with necessities. So is histapkus a part of Rabbeinu Yonah's definition? That's the question that's kind of open in my mind. Yeah, Vanessa?
I am mindful, like, he's saying to only put this neder on yourself temporarily, which makes me think, like, maybe he doesn't value, like, abstaining from meat forever, for example.
Right.
Unless I'm misunderstanding something he's
So I think the reason why he's saying it temporarily is because of what he says next. He says, but it is only proper for a person to utilize vows if his inclination overpowers him, in which case he may vow as a remedy. But one who is in control of his emotions and can attain the trait of Prishus without a vow should not vow. As they said, is it not enough what the Torah prohibited to you that you prohibit that which is permitted? That's what the Rambam says. But certainly, if a person sees his inclination overpowering him and he needs extra fences, he should add them in accordance with what he needs to conquer his inclination. And once his inclination is conquered, he should return to the middle path. So that is actually going back now to maybe returning to the middle path does not mean, see, it's confusing, because early when he said Prishus, he did say you only eat what's necessary, but now it sounds like he's saying go back to the middle path.
Yeah, I think it goes back and forth. And also he's talking about an inclination to what? Like, there's no reason to be concerned about an inclination to eat meat. There's an inclination, there's a reason to be worried about an inclination to overeat.
Right. Yeah. I think that I agree with the question.
That Rabbeinu Yonah's definition is so different from the Rambam's. I think they're just approaching it in different ways.
Let me just finish reading this paragraph. Yeah. This may be compared to a doctor. When he sees that the illness is mild and easy to cure, he administers a mild medicine. But when the illness is severe and strong, he will choose a remedy until it is healed, and afterwards he will go back and give him moderate things to restore his body to its healthy state. So let me just summarize the question that we have here. So Vanessa said, why does he only advocate doing it for a limited time? Okay, so one reason you could say it is because you do it for a limited time until you attain Prishus, and then you go back to relating to these pleasures in a healthy way. The other way to say it is, no, you use a neder for a limited time, And then you stop the neder, but continue to limit yourself to what's necessary beyond, even beyond the limited time. So the question is, how much does he agree with the Rambam or not when he's saying the middle path, you know?
Can I ask about the second one?
Yeah.
What would be the point of a time limit neder if you're just going to continue doing it afterwards?
Because the ideal is to not do it through a neder. The ideal is to do it through your own exercise of free will.
But then why not just have a long-standing neder?
Because you don't want to be in a state of neder, because neder is always exposing yourself to risk of Isser. And also, whatever this idea is that I wrote about with the Bama, with making a private altar, that's another reason to like not take a neder. I don't remember what I said there. Yeah, Alex?
So ultimately, does it come down to like creating the mitos that make you capable of like what's the word? Relating to things in a healthy way, or is it really about? Well, yeah, okay, that's the question. Is it really about cultivating that?
That is exactly the question. And if you go back to those Rambams that we just read, he also says, oh no, not the ones we just read there. A lot of Rambams flying around tonight. Yeah, see, it's funny because the Rambam doesn't have anything about the physical pleasures here. He says you're porish from the people, okay? And you can see, look, we had just a couple of weeks ago, the mishnah that says sitting in gatherings of amei haaretz, of like ordinary people, removes you from the world because it exposes you to bad midos. So yeah, if you can use this tool of like not eating tamei things in order to separate from people, that will bring you to purity of the body, not from pleasures, but from evil actions. And then purity of the body brings you to Kedusha of the soul, not from physical pleasures, but from bad character traits. And the Kedusha of the soul causes you to emulate the Shekhinah. So nowhere in this whole mix does he have like any idea of asceticism at all, you know? So that is a strike in, or that's a check in that column. Yeah. So, I mean, by the end of this Rabbeinu Yonah, but not by the end, by where we got to, it does seem like he is saying that the middle path is the correct thing and nedarim are only remedial. But then the problem is, again, just to reread the early part of his definition, he doesn't have in mind to benefit from the world, or the way he said it earlier is haporish mehanaos haolam. He separates from the world, even from things that are mutter. And then in his example, he did say that he only eats what's necessary. So I think those are contradictory implications. Yeah, Ayala?
Maybe the middle path comment, like maybe we're viewing the middle path based off of like the way the Rambam views it or something of like, we think, like maybe can you mean by the middle path that you're neutral in the sense that you're not desiring pleasure and you're not going at all towards that side and you're just completely like doing what is necessary, and he'll call that the middle path because it is not like you're not depriving yourself. So in that sense, it's like not towards that extreme.
Well, you are depriving yourself, right?
Of pleasure, right?
Of pleasure, right? Yeah. Like in other words, you ask this guy on Shabbos. Let's say it's on Shabbos, right? And you ask him, do you want dessert? So according to the Rambam's definition, it'll all depend on, can I control myself with the dessert? And if I can control myself and just partake of the pleasure without getting addicted or harming my health, then he'll say, sure. But it sounds like Rabbeinu Yonah's guy will say, well, is a dessert nutritionally necessary? And if it's not, then I won't have it. Alex?
Could it be that both options are possible for different kinds of people, like the kind of people who just aren't capable of relating to things in a healthy way, like someone who has an addiction, right?
Yeah.
You would end the neder, but ideally keep going. But for someone who is capable of cultivating a way of existing in a moderate, existence with how they relate to the specific thing, they break, like they're done with the neder, and then they could, be like a normal person, quote unquote, relating to things.
Okay, so conceptually you are correct that there are two different models that work for two different people, but the Rabbeinu Yonah is saying one definition of Prishus. I'm not comfortable saying that the Rabbeinu Yonah is like using Prishus in two different ways. That's why I want to like pin it down. Yeah, Lauren?
Okay. I guess I keep thinking about it like a very Haredi relative that I had that's like very like she only eats in her own home. She won't even eat in her children's homes, and she takes tons of different vitamins, and she's like very, very strict with like her diet, and she's like, has no internet in her home, whatever, she lives in Israel and is very cut off. And I guess I'm kind of thinking that like, and I have like a negative association with that kind of attitude because I don't think that the Torah demands us of that. But a lot of the things that I'm sensing from this Rabbeinu Yonah is like maybe not to that extreme, but like she is very like detached from physical pleasures and just is doing what is necessary. And I'm wondering if Rabbeinu Yonah's definition is that like you take on a neder to get to a point where you are detached from physical desires in the sense, and then like you're totally dedicated towards learning Torah and being involved in mitzvos because you're like it's kind of like the other things just facilitate as opposed to like being a distraction.
Right. So I think that we have to differentiate between. Okay, first of all, I think we have to acknowledge that it is possible that there are two different ideas of Prishus here, right? That we're gonna just for the sake of like ease to talk about the Rambam's idea of Prishus, which is purely as a means of curing a disease, and then Prishus as an ideal. Okay, but I think within Prishus as an ideal, you can differentiate between one that everyone would reject, and then another one that I think is it might be what Rabbeinu Yonah is saying. The one everyone would reject is that these things are evil in and of themselves, like intrinsically, or that like abstinence per se is good. But I think Prishus as an ideal, according to what you just said, is a proper thing, which is that like these things do take you away from, or can take you away from involvement in matters of the soul. And to the extent that you are involved in, like to the extent that you're involved in these things, you're not involved in matters of the soul, and you're putting yourself at risk of being pulled back into these things. So like if you are living that Prishus life, but you're focusing on matters of the soul, then that could be a good thing. If you're just living the Prishus life, like those Catholic priests, that's like bad according to everybody, I want to say, I just want to say really quickly also that I don't like to spread rumors, okay? But I'm going to tell you about this rumor because it's something that you should investigate for yourself. People say that Avraham ben Rambam had a somewhat more pietistic streak than his father did, than the Rambam did, okay? And so I'd be curious, Avraham ben Rambam has his book, Hamaspik L'Ovdei Hashem, and he has in there a chapter on Prishus. I'd be curious to look at that. I'm not going to do it now, and see like, if maybe he articulates what this other view is a little bit more. I just want to mention that for the record. Yeah, Ayala?
Are you able to just clarify one more time? Well, what do you mean, first of all, by that this other view? And like, I'm a little bit blurred on the definitions.
Okay, so let me just write this out here. Okay, so what we have here is, I'm going to call this Rambam's Prishus, okay, which is abstaining from physical pleasure if you're overly attached, so that you can get back to a healthy middle path. Okay, but there's no point in refraining from pleasure per se. Okay, right, provided that you can relate to it in a healthy way. I'm just erring on the side of wordiness here. Okay, Rabbeinu Yonah's Prishus is abstaining from physical pleasure and only involving yourself in it to the point where, oh, you know what? No, this is not what the Rambam holds either. I have to read you something else on the Rambam now. Okay, so we read that thing in chapter 3 in Deos, okay, where he says it's an evil path if you like abstain from everything. Okay, but then right after that he says, person needs to orient all of his actions to know Hashem alone, like just for the sake of knowledge of God. His sitting and his standing and his speech all should be for that purpose. Ketzad, how so? When he does his business to get payment, he shouldn't have in mind just to accumulate money. You know what? I think I actually probably wrote this in English somewhere. Hold on. I'm sure I've translated this. Okay. Let's see. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, so he should not intend solely to accumulate money, but rather he should do these things in order to attain his bodily needs, such as food, drink, dwelling in a house, and marrying a woman. Likewise, when he eats and drinks and has sexual intercourse, he should not do these things with the sole intention to derive pleasure, to the extent that he only eats and drinks what is sweet to the palate and only engages in sexual intercourse in order to derive pleasure, but rather his sole intention when he eats and drinks should be to make his body and limbs healthy. Therefore, he should not eat everything that is desirable to the palate, like a dog or a donkey. It doesn't mean don't eat a dog or a donkey. It means eat like a dog or a donkey. But rather, he should eat things which are beneficial for him, whether they are sweet or bitter. And he should not eat things that are bad for the body, even though they're sweet for the palate. He should eat and drink in a healthy manner in order to be healthy and complete. Okay, so that's interesting also, right? He doesn't say you should avoid the sweet things. He says you should eat based on health, regardless of whether it's sweet or not, you know? Which Rabbeinu Yonah is not necessarily disagreeing with, but it's just like the way they're talking about it might be different. Okay, and I think the part I omitted here, because I was using this for high school, is I omitted the stuff about sex. He says that basically you should, you should only have sex for procreation or for health. Okay, not just for pleasure. Okay.
Would like connecting with a spouse be under the Rambam's idea of like permitted, not even permitted, but
no,
like
that actually
proper?
is an obligation. Is that the man is actually obligated to make his wife happy sexually?
But like that's what I'm saying. Like that would be a plus in the Rambam's. Like that's included.
Yeah, it'd be
in,
a plus, but it's not even in this realm. It's more basic than this realm. Like that person has to do even if they don't want to. Like that's like yeah. I mean, this is also he has to do if he doesn't want to, but okay. And he says, but one who lives in accordance with the dictates of health, if his sole intention is that his body and limbs should be whole and strong, this is not a good path. Rather, he should have the intention for his body to be whole and strong in order that his soul should be upright to know Hashem. For it is impossible to understand and contemplate wisdom when one is sick or when one of his limbs causes him pain. Consequently, one who follows this path all the days of his life will be serving Hashem continually, even when he is conducting his business and even when he's having intercourse. For his soul, his intention in everything is to acquire his needs so that his body can be whole in order to serve Hashem. Even during the time when he is asleep, if he knows that by sleeping he will put his mind and body at rest so that he doesn't become sick and unable to serve Hashem, then his sleep will be service to the true being, blessed is he. The sages commanded regarding this, saying, let all your actions be for the sake of heaven. This is what Solomon in his wisdom said regarding this: in all your ways know him. So the Rambam also has this idea of, okay, see, they're talking about it in a different way. See, I'm going back and forth.
Could I?
Yeah, go ahead, Vanessa.
I
Yeah.
have like I don't know how justified this is. It sounds more like, let's say where they're both talking about the Yetzer Hara in a way, because we're trying to like reduce certain like bad qualities, even though they're not like bad. They're not prohibitions, or they're trying to like lessen a bad instinct.
Yeah.
So maybe Rabbeinu Yonah is trying to say like, listen, limit yourself so that way you lower your Yetzer Hara, and like the less you give your Yetzer Hara the opportunity, the better it'll be. Whereas like the Rambam is saying, subdue the Yetzer Hara so that way like you can transform it, and like when you go back into doing these things, you'll be doing it for the sake of Hashem, and like you'll give your time to reset and like. Am I making sense?
Yeah, you're making sense. Yeah. The only thing is, I still don't know if Rabbeinu Yonah would disagree with that, or if the Rambam would disagree with the Rabbeinu Yonah's thing. Like, I hear that there is a difference. I'm not sure what the overlap is, though. Yeah, Tamar?
I was going to say similar to Vanessa, I think. Yeah, I feel like maybe the emphasis of the Rambam is that all of your actions should have this higher quality, which is a little bit different from combating the Yetzer Hara. Yeah,
I'm getting that as well. And it's funny because the Rabbeinu Yonah, that's strikingly absent from the Rabbeinu Yonah's explanation of Prishus. Now, you could just say he's not talking about that, but in every place that we've seen where the Rambam talks about it, he talks about avodas Hashem, you know. And again, I don't want to make Rabbeinu Yonah out to seem like he's an anti-avodas Hashem guy, but like it is funny that he just doesn't like state the positive, you know. Let me do one thing. There's one last paragraph in the Rabbeinu Yonah that I want to read. And this paragraph is the whole reason that I wanted to give this shiur tonight. Okay. This is all very good. But this last thing was like a chiddush in habit cultivation. Okay. For me. So far, what we've seen him say is that how do you use vows to get Prishus? Is you say, practically speaking, how do you do it? You say, this thing is usher to me for a limited amount of time, or this quantity is usher for me, okay? But now he's going to clarify and say, regarding this, they said vows are offense to Prishus. They did not say oaths are offense to Prishus, because an oath takes effect immediately. Namely, he swears that he will not eat a specific thing until a specific date. And this is not a fence, since it takes effect immediately in a manner that he cannot violate. Okay. Rather, a vow is when he says, now this is a tweaking his example. A vow is when he says, if I eat more than this amount until such and such a day, all the fruits in the world will become prohibited to me until a specific fixed time. So let's take the case like this. Let's say I have an addiction to eating strawberries. Okay. And I say that from now, this is not a netter, from now until June 1st, I will only eat 3 strawberries each day, max, okay? And if I eat more, then all fruit will be usher to me until July 1st, okay? So you set up like a tripwire. Yeah, Alex?
Isn't that almost like making an ultimatum to yourself, where if like you don't do this will happen? Okay.
Yeah, but here's how he frames the difference, and this is the interesting part. This is called a fence, since it is something he can violate. It is permitted to do this. Okay, then he says it is permitted to do this for one whose heart is directed to heaven, and one who cannot control himself to make such a fence without such a vow. Okay, so but that's the thing. Okay, so he's saying like this. Yeah, so again, just to clarify, the way he's understanding is a shavua. A shavua would be to say that no more strawberries, okay? Or to say, or to say no more than 3 strawberries. And that's between now and June 1st, okay? But what he's saying you should do for a netter is, I can eat more than 3 strawberries, but if I do, then that's going to trigger an isser on a larger category of things. So what's the chop in that? I feel like as soon as I read this, even before I understood, I was like, there's wisdom here. And I think the key is he's saying, look at the 2 phrases here. He's saying that the reason why an oath is not good, he says, this is not offense since it takes effect immediately in a manner he cannot violate. And then he says for a netter, it is offense because it is something he can violate. Yeah, Ayala. Oh, sorry. I mean, Vanessa. Vanessa's first. Yeah.
Okay. It sounds like he's trying to like bring you back to Bechira. Like, if you know, like the whole point is that you're overindulging and like you almost can't stop yourself. Like I'm thinking of like binge eating because I work with eating disorders and I make everything about eating disorders. Like thinking of like a binge eating disorder, like it's compulsory. Like you're trying to, I think the idea is to like stop the compulsion. You're like, hey, you have Bechira. If you don't stop, like this is gonna be a netter for you and you're gonna have actual consequences, but like the choice is yours and it like keeps you from breaking like a full netter.
Yeah.
And, like going even further down the like.
Okay.
Because indulgence is a bad meat don't like.
I think that's a good description. I think Bechira is definitely part of this. I have a different way of saying it, but Ayala?
I was going to say something which I don't like as much as what Vanessa just said, but I was going to say that you're kind of setting up negative consequences for yourself.
That's what I was going to say. Okay, I'll tell you why I like it. Okay, so here's what I think is if you make a netter, if you make a shavua, you're just creating another isser for yourself. Okay, and isser is a way of like, developing character traits, but it is not really through Bechira because it is just saying you can't do this. Okay, it's through compulsion, right? But Rabbeinu Yonah is advocating using an isur to generate consequences for yourself, that consequences that don't naturally exist. If I eat 4 strawberries, there's no natural consequence that all the fruit in the world suddenly just like becomes obliterated, and I can't eat it anymore. But what I'm doing is like, I am creating a situation where I have the choice to eat 4 strawberries, but then if I do that, I have to pay the cost of not eating any fruit for another 2 months, So you are generating other consequences. And then that's what puts it into the realm of bechira, like Vanessa was saying, because bechira is you're evaluating the thing based on the consequences and making a choice, not just saying this is off limits. Yeah, Alex?
I was going to add that if you wanted to give like language to that idea, you could call it like accountability, because like now that it exists, you have like consequences and accountability.
Correct.
So there's more to it.
Right. That's a good way to put it. So a shavua does not create accountability. It just creates violation, right? It's just, if you violate the shavua, you violated God's will. This use of neder creates accountability, where if you violate this, you can violate it, but you have to take responsibility for it by paying the price that you've created and attached to it. Yeah, Ayala?
What I was thinking Vanessa was saying before, which I think is a little bit different also, is kind of like slowing yourself down, which like removes the momentum of the thing, and then like you can also make the choice there.
Right. I think so. Yeah. I think that's a good way to put it, is creating the space in which to have the bechira.
I think it's less about like weighing options and more just like stopping the animalistic thing. Like you're not just like an animal who's like, that's why he brings in the donkey and the dog. So it's like, you're not just eating because you are eating. It's like, oh, right, I'm eating. This is a choice I'm making, even though it doesn't feel like a choice. That's just, it's like remembering that you're making a choice, let alone what the consequences are.
That's a good way to put it.
And it's like the whole point of the consequence is to like actually force it, because it's an alarm.
Yeah, right, exactly. So the fact that he is so makpid on this word siag, okay, here at least, to me suggests that there's probably going to be a lot more work to be done in the siags in the rest of the Mishnah, because here he knows like this. A siag is not just something that stops you from acting, okay, or that protects you because siag is not just something that reinforces this good trait by stopping you. It has to be stopping you in a certain way. And it sounds like we're saying it's through bechira, okay? So that's just something to keep in mind. But let's now, I think we're going to bring this to a close for tonight, even though we didn't wrap everything up yet. Let's just review what we have, though. Okay, what is Prishus and what's the difference between Prishus and Kedusha? So we did not get a solid definition of this, but we got that Prishus, according to Rabbeinu Yonah, seems to involve, it requires self-restraint, but it's not synonymous with, I'm gonna put this final notes. Okay, final notes. Okay, it involves self-restraint, but is not synonymous. That is not synonymous with self-restraint. Okay, it involves a certain detachment from worldly pleasures. Okay, either like as an ideal, or because one is, or to combat an unhealthy relationship with those pleasures. Okay, it seems to involve a minimization of any worldly involvements which are not necessary. Okay, so this is according to Rabbeinu Yonah. Okay, then we had, according to the Rambam, Prishus is a means of cultivating other character traits which lead to Yedias Hashem, knowledge of God, But then the question was, would the Rambam's Parush abstain from pleasures that can be related to in a healthy way? Okay. Rabbeinu Yonah seems like he's saying that, except for his use of the middle path. Okay, and this is v'tzarich iyun, which means we still need to investigate that. Okay, how are nedarim a siag leprishus? So what we're saying is that not simply by prohibiting you from engaging in the thing, typing is slowing down, in the thing, but rather by as a mechanism for creating artificial consequences which enable new or reinforced bechira decisions. Okay, through this you will practice self-control through bechira, and that will enable you to attain Prishus. Okay, so that's putting it all together, right? Is that like it's not just, if you just use Isser like a Shavua, you're just stopping yourself from doing it, and it's not really going to develop this character trait. But through using neder to create time-bound, actually I should say time-bound, temporary. So you're creating these temporary artificial consequences so that you can now stop and slow down, exercise your bechira, and say, well, if I do this, I'm going to get this huge consequence. And then that allows you to practice self-control. And then by practicing self-control repeatedly in regards to worldly pleasures, you end up becoming detached from worldly pleasures. And then you get into whatever definition of Prishus it is. And what are the guidelines is see above. Okay. I think that was a useful, very practical, nice to have a practical Pirkei Avos thing. Yeah, Ayala?
This may be too big of a question, but according to the Rambam, the question about if you could relate to pleasures in a healthy way, what would that mean, a healthy way?
So healthy way would seem to mean that it is not interfering with your ability to seek Yedias Hashem, to seek knowledge of God. What that means, I don't know. Like, yeah.
And theoretically, that's possible.
Theoretically, that's, I would say so. Yeah. Yeah. Like, for example, I'll give you an example of the, going back to the rumor, Rambam, there's a mitzvah of Oneg Shabbos, right? And meaning eating higher quality, more enjoyable foods. Okay. But if you go to the Aaron ben Rambam's thing, hold on. When he gives his examples of the different ways of relating to Shabbos, he says, okay, so this is talking about like the different levels of keeping Shabbos. So he says, for example, consider the Shabbos observance of 3 highly perfected individuals. The first person follows the derech an, which just means he keeps halacha to keep Shabbos and refrain from desecrating it, but he adds a derech hayachid. He adds an individual path for perfection, namely through reflecting in a general way upon the purpose of Shabbos and contemplating the creation of the universe. Okay, but I'm just going to summarize this part. So the first guy keeps regular Shabbos, but then he thinks about the universe. Second guy keeps Shabbos, but then he thinks about each element of creation and then delves into the chachma of creation. Okay, that's higher. Now listen to this third guy. Okay, the third person's derech hayachid does as follows. He will contemplate everything that the second person did, but will delve so deeply into a scientific analysis and study that he will ascend to the level of true kedusha. He will rejoice in his maker due to the radiance of the Shekhinah with which illuminated him in his studies. He will attain proof of his greatness, of God's greatness, from the greatness of his creations. He will comprehend the bonds between himself and his creator, the bond of his intellect and the bond of the mitzvahs, which is one of the intended objectives of his creator in our observance of Shabbos. As it says, it is a sign between me and between Bnei Israel forever. He will diminish his involvement in anything that weakens this bond, and therefore he will refrain from any eating and drinking on Shabbos, which interrupts him from his studies, and he will refrain from off-topic conversation and certainly from idle chatter. Ultimately, through this derech, he will attain an inner fear of Hashem and love of the heavens with such a strong yearning for the living God that even when his limbs crave nourishment, he will not sense hunger, since his soul is fattened with its portion and has attained, as David said, which it is attained. As David said, my soul is sated as with fat and abundance. Sounds will resonate in his ears, but he will be too preoccupied to hear them. Perceptible items might pass before his eyes, but he will not see them as if his eyes are covered. Through his derech, he will reach the realm of his desire and the hope of his soul. As it is stated, your name and the remembrance of you are the desire of the soul. Without a doubt, this third derech of observing Shabbos is different from the second, as the second is different from the first, okay, and etc. So that line of he will refrain from any eating and drinking on Shabbos, which interrupts him from his studies, and like this minimization of the physical here, like I don't get that vibe from what I read from the Rambam, so like when Avram and his father were sitting down for a Shabbos Suda, and then Avram said, "You want this extra piece of cake?" And Avram and Rambam and the Rambam himself was like, "I enjoy cake in a healthy way, like I'm not being like, would Avram and Rambam say like no, like ideally we should move away from that?" This is the area that I'm still having a question about. Okay, I think I need to look at what Avram and Rambam says about Prishus and then look at other stuff from the Rambam, but I think we're good for tonight. I will bli neder send you this article I entitled Bli neder, and that's where it explains this idea that anyone who makes a vow is considered as though he built a bama. Okay, I don't remember what I said. I'll have to review it and see if it still holds up. Okay, so next week, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to look through the other clauses of the Mishnah. I don't know if we're going to do all of them. Okay, I have to decide if it's worth our time. But if I find stuff that's worthwhile, then we'll do it. Bli neder. Okay, have a good night.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Thank you.